Alicia said, you know, it's not like I have a house to clean at home or clothes to fold, but that's fine. You need to know what you're doing in math. Dimensions can be tricky and overwhelming as a mom, as a teacher, but we want you guys to feel really confident in it, and we want you guys to communicate really well, also to your children, how you feel about it. Because that really dictates how their view of math goes. If you say, oh, this is just silly, this is not how I did it, they're going to start picking up on that, because it's not how you did it. And so, this is great you're here. It's a great way to learn. When we learn things, then we can teach it, and our motto is in the teaching we learn, it's all connected. So, Liz and Sarah have done an awesome job getting this seminar ready for you guys. They know a lot in this area. They're kind of the math gurus. So, be brave and vulnerable. Ask your questions. There's no dumb questions. So, I hope this time is beneficial for you guys, and y'all will do great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You need to clarify, I'm not a math guru. That's not me. That actually is funny. I grew up thinking that I was terrible at math and that this was the worst. And I sat in a math class in college where I learned how to teach third grade math, and I went, oh. Because it took me until then to realize what I had missed somewhere along the way, because sometimes it really is that in teaching your kids, that some little piece in your brain goes, I missed that when I was in second grade. And that's a good thing. That's good. We really are so glad you're here. The first thing that I just really want to start off with is like what dimensions really is, what isn't. So it is not a procedural way of math, which is how we were taught, which is where you start with step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Because we want your kids to think about math and make decisions about math and fully understand it. Because I was the kid who could memorize the steps and do it and had no clue why it worked. I didn't understand what was happening, and if it looked slightly different, I could not apply because I didn't really know what it was. So that's what we're doing. And I want to say that I now have a 9th grader and a 6th grader and a 4th grader, and it really works. I have now been able to teach from kinder all the way through to 9th grade. I don't claim teaching geometry, but she is in geometry now, and she's doing beautifully, and I don't have to teach her geometry because of some of the things that she learned here. And she actually says, she came in 4th grade, I really wish I could have had another year of dimensions, because she said, my peers that had that extra year, there's a big difference. So I want you to know that what you're doing day in and day out, it matters, and it really does make a difference, even if sometimes you are saying, I'm gonna pull my hair out. Why can't we just stack up the numbers and add them? Because that's how we learned it. And that is why. So, the other thing about Dimensions is that Dimensions actually had a previous program that we actually used if you were here in the beginning, and it required multiple books. So if you wanted challenging problems, you got that book. If you wanted extra word problems, you purchased that book. If you wanted to have some supplemental practice, you purchased that book. And Dimensions realized that there was a need to have everything all in one place. So what this means is all of the games, all of the activities, and every single problem are supposed to be for if you need support, extra problems, challenging, and that means that not every student has to do every single problem. That's also why there's more than one way to do things. So you older kids, you have those days, that's actually something we hear a lot. There's 3 ways to do the problem. How do I pick? That's on purpose, because the kids are supposed to pick the one that's the way their brain works. Generally, a kid will lean towards one and say, this one makes sense to me. I understand how to add on here, but I don't understand how to do the subtraction method. And so then that way they can pick the one that that their brain works that way. That's the beauty of this model, that we get to be at home with our kids and giving our kids specifically what they need. I have been so thankful time and time again that I got to be on the other side of the table with my kids and giving them exactly what them as a student needed. Because I know them. in a way that those teachers didn't know them. And I got to sit there and say, okay, I know how your brain works here. I can see you doing this, and you can lean into those terms because you know your kids so well. Another thing about dimensions is that it is going to move from concrete, meaning manipulatives, hands-on. Measurement in kindergarten is go around your house and find something that weighs a pound. And then it's going to go to pictorial, and then measurement in second grade is going to be pictures. So this is a little pound symbol and this is a little pound symbol. If we add them together, it's going to be pictures supposed to be linking to what they did when they held a pound in their hand and figured out what it was. And then in fourth grade, we go to abstract, and we now have where we are converting measurements. And they have to have an innate understanding of how big an ounce is and how big a pound is, because if they never got the picture in their brain, they're going to have a harder time, because that's how we teach it. We teach it, go from the bigger one to the smaller one, and if they go, well, how big is an ounce? Then we've missed something along the way, right? So those are the things that is how it is designed to work. It is designed to go from concrete to pictorial to abstract, which means that if your kid is struggling, you can also go back some steps and do it a different way. The concepts that are laid out are usually built to help build understanding. It's curated very specifically. The lessons that you learn, just like I said with those measurement things, are going to build from year to year. They will also build from lesson to lesson. You'll see a lot of part 1 and then part 2 the next day. You'll see a lot of, now I'm most familiar with 4th grade because that's what I taught here with 4th grade math, but in multiples and factors, there's only one little lesson. There's only 3 or 4 lessons in it, one little chapter. But then we use those the entire rest of the year. We use what we learned there to be able to make equivalent fractions. And we use them when we are doing long division. And those are it's going to build step by step by step. So all of that is to say that if that's how it's designed, then we gotta be able to work within how it's actually laid out. So Liz is going to kind of tell you how to actually hold the book and what you should do with it and how you should think about it. And she's looking at me weird, but it's true.
Thanks. Sarah, you said something, and I think now what it was that I was going to say something about. Oh, the concrete pictorial abstract. A couple of things is that it does move that way. Like from kindergarten, we may do something concrete, and then in first grade it's pictorial, and by the time it gets to us in 5th grade, it's abstract. But sometimes you'll also see that within the same grade level. Like we'll start in 3rd grade doing something with fractions using concrete hands-on manipulatives. And then 2 lessons later, we've taken away those hands-on manipulatives, and now you've got pictures of fractions. And then 3 lessons later, now the pictures of fractions are gone, and we're strictly doing abstract, just writing down the fractions without pictures that go with it. So just know that sometimes what you're seeing is building from prior years, like, hey, years ago you held this with your hands, and now we're not even holding it with our hands. We don't even see pictures anymore. Well, it's because we did those a couple years ago. And then sometimes it happens that way even within the same chapter, within the same year. You'll start with concrete and move to pictures, and then you'll move to just abstract stuff. So it just, one of the things that I really love about Dimensions is that you can tell it was written by math people. I've taught a lot of curriculums along the years, and sometimes you're like, oh, somebody in the science department for sure wrote this math book. But this is not. Like, these are people who know math and do math and have studied math and researched math, and they know what they're doing. And it can feel overwhelming. I think we hear that a lot from parents. There's so many things in here. There's so much to see. And there is, but it's really well laid out. This is my 21st year, I think, in education, and all of those have included math in some way. And I just want you to hear us say, like, I have so much confidence in this. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I have a junior and a freshman and a 4-year-old. And my junior and freshman have been here since the beginning, so we've done this now for 7 years. And they're good at math. And they're good at math because we've used this and some other things along the way. But It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's fun for me now because Boone's in 4 years old. He's in pre-K. And so I haven't really had any experience with the little kid dimension books until now. And, we're 8 weeks in, so it's not like it's real exciting. It's, can you count groups of 2? Can you count groups of 3? But even watching him in those little bitty books, I see it. Like I see, oh, this is, like they're starting it here, and I know where it's headed because I've done it now for so long. But all that to say, it's just be confident, have faith in it, trust the process, because I've seen it now from little bitty all the way to the really bigs, and it's good stuff. Okay, so how it's laid out, this is kind of going to be tricky to show with my microphone. But at the beginning of each lesson, and I'm holding a 5th grade book, so my 5th grade book is going to look a lot different than your kindergarten book. But at the beginning of each lesson, if you look, there's always in the teacher book, you've got kind of a scope and sequence at the beginning. So it's going to show you, like, here are the different lessons that go with this chapter. And if you're like me, sometimes I need to see the big picture before I can start in the little pieces. Like, you can tell me that this is the lesson I'm doing today, but I'm not going to buy into it until I know why I'm doing this lesson and where I'm headed. So this is really helpful for you to be able to take a quick glance and say, oh, we're starting here, but by the end of this chapter, we're going to be here. Even more so at the very beginning of this book, way back to the beginning, and this is in all of them. It'll show you from pre-K all the way, it'll show you from pre-K all the way through like 5th grade, what they're learning. And so, thank you. So when you're in pre-K or you're in kindergarten or you're first, and you're like, why are we doing this? Well, on those days, I would encourage you to flip back to the beginning and just take a quick look. It's really, they're organized very nicely. Like, this is whole numbers. It shows you all the stuff about whole numbers in 5th grade. You can go back and it'll show you all the stuff about whole numbers in 4th grade and whole numbers in 3rd grade. And it'll help you track all the way from where you're at to where they're headed, or where you're at now. If your kid is struggling, you can back up to where maybe they missed something in 3rd grade, or maybe they missed something in 2nd grade. It'll kind of help you get a big picture of where you're headed and where they've been. Okay. There's gonna go. It's fine. Video watchers are fine. Okay, so you've got your big overall picture at the beginning of each chapter, and then y'all, this is your bang for your buck. In 4th grade, when I wrote 4th grade lesson plans, I assigned this. In 5th grade, when I write 5th grade lesson plans, I assigned this. I think school-wide, we're pretty much assigning it in every grade. But if for some reason somebody forgets to assign it one week, this is your bang for the buck right here. It gives you all the information. This is like the teacher tips and tricks that say, hey, it's more than just the little information that comes in the sidebar every day in each lesson. This is the big idea. This is the depth and the meat of how we're teaching it as a parent and why we're teaching it. This is your parent, concrete, pictorial, abstract, from hard to easy, from beginning to end. This is your meat of your information right here. I would encourage you, when you start a new chapter, don't feel like you have to read all the pages at once and try to make sense of them. If you're going to be overwhelmed, just read the part you need for that chapter, for that lesson, and it will tell you, hey, in the year before, this is what they learned, and then it will tell you specifically, in lesson 1, students will do this. So when you get to the next chunk here, and it says something like, in lesson 3, don't worry about going all the way to lesson 30. Stick with what you need for the minute, read what you need for lesson 1, and then before you teach lesson 3, then come back here and look again. Okay, now this is what I need to study for lesson 3. If you're a math person, you might could read all the pages and be just fine. But if you're a math person, or if you're not a math person, and that feels overwhelming to you to try to make sense of all of the things all at once, read what you need as you go. Once you get into it, all of the lessons are designed. It will tell you at the top right here, like here are the objectives for the day. So again, I'm a big picture person. I need to know, hey, at the end of this lesson, my kid should be able to do what? Well, here's your objective. It says right at the top, this is what your objective is for the day. Sometimes it's helpful to go ahead and look a couple lessons down the line, like, hey, is this the only day that we're doing this subject? Or am I going to do it again the next day? Because that tells me also as a mom, like, hey, how in depth do I need to go? How concerned do I need to be if my kid does not understand what they're doing today? Well, maybe I need to be real concerned if I look and this is the one and only day that it looks like we're doing this. But if I look and I'm like, oh, hey, we're doing this again the next day, and we're doing this again the next day, then I will have to be quite so concerned. Am I just going to throw my hands up and say, oh, I'll let the teacher deal with it tomorrow? Please don't. That's not a good plan. But it does mean that you don't have to really sweat it as much if you can see, okay, this is an introduction today, and tomorrow we're going a little deeper, and the next day we're going a little bit deeper. So you have that right here in your hands. The access is yours. You can flip ahead and see what's coming up. There's always some sort of lesson to start with. They call it a think. So they give them something to think about. And then there's always a learn. Sometimes the learn has different pieces. Like Sarah was saying earlier, sometimes learn will give you, here's one way that you could do this. And then there will be another way you could do this. And there will be another way you can do this. And sometimes that's really helpful for kids to have lots of options. Sometimes it's overwhelming. And you as a parent know your kid. And so if you look ahead and you say, whoa, there's 3 options tomorrow in our lesson. 3 options is going to be a lot for my kid. You know your kid. Choose the 2 options that you want them to see, or choose the 1 option you want them to see. I will tell you as a teacher, I usually always show them all of the choices. This week in 5th grade math, we're subtracting mixed numbers, and a mixed number minus a mixed number. It often involves regrouping. They have to find common denominators. It's tricky. And the book gave them 3 different options, and I looked at the 3 options and thought, these are the dumbest 3 options I've ever seen. Actually, I thought one of them was great. I thought the other 2 were terrible. And so this is when I pulled my teacher card this week, and I said to the kids, y'all, they're going to give you 3 options. I've looked ahead. I've done this for a long time. We're going to do this 1 option. It's the only option I'm showing you this week, and this is the only way that you will do it. So just know, there are times, I wouldn't encourage that all the time, but there are times, particularly when you get into something that's pretty complex, that as the mom at home, it's okay for you to say, I think that I know my kid, and this way right here is going to totally throw my kid for a loop. I'm not going to show them that way. Now, I would say that in the younger grades, I would encourage you not to do that as much as I would say by the time they get older, it's probably more okay. In the younger grades, so much of it is still so foundational, and the chances are really good that they're showing you multiple options because they're going to need those multiple options as they get older. But by the time we get to 5th grade, or 4th grade even, you've been in this long enough now to know, oh, this is the way my kid processes, this is what my kid's good at, this is what feels overwhelming to my kid. And I think you have a lot more leeway the older you get to be able to say, hold on, I haven't seen anything that looks like this for the last couple of years. Hold on, I think you're going to feel overwhelmed. I'm going to show you just this one way. So I would just encourage you, I guess a really long-winded way of saying, number 1, don't wait till the last minute and open up your book the day of and be like, oh, there's 3 different methods and I've never seen any of them. And then secondly, you are the boss of your house. You get to be the boss of your house. Do the lessons we tell you to do, but you know your kids. And when we're in class here, sometimes we have 15 kids in class. I'm going to teach big picture idea for all 15 kids in my class. But when I get home the next day, that's your chance. When you get home the next day, that's your chance to say, now I get to individualize for my kid what my kid needs. And you get to do what we can't do in class with 15 kids. So, I don't know, Sarah and I were talking the other day about the different subjects that we teach. And I would say that most of the subjects we teach, history, science, Bible, memory work, those don't require a whole lot of prep work, right? You can open up the history book and be like, oh, this is what we're reading today. Oh, this is what we're reading the Bible today. It doesn't take a whole lot of ahead of time looking at stuff. Even LOE, I would say, is pretty much that way. Math is not going to be that way. So if math is the one thing that on Tuesdays, while your kid's at school, you have to get out your math and look ahead for what's coming Wednesday and Friday, this is your one thing where you really need to look ahead. Don't let this be the thing where you open it up, especially if you don't feel like you're a math expert. Don't let this be the thing where you open it up the day of and say, let's figure out what we're doing today. You're just going to be flustered. Your kids can read that. Then they know you're frustrated. They're frustrated. Anyways. Okay, so it'll start with, you've got an objective at the beginning. It gives you a think. It gives you a learn, which also often gives you more than one way to do things. And then it moves into practice. The do is always just practice. Typically, it starts with easy problems, and then it moves into more challenging problems, Oftentimes they're story problems. Oftentimes they wait till the end to put the story problems. So you know your kid has a more solid understanding before those story problems start showing up. When you move to the workbook, and I don't have a workbook for example, but you've got workbooks. When you move to the workbook, you know at the beginning there's often basics at the beginning, and then it'll jump to the just regular problems, and then there'll be a challenge. Like Sarah said earlier, these books are designed to have every problem you could really possibly need to give your kid. Does that mean that if your kid is struggling, you're not ever going to need to find something supplementally to offer them as extra practice? No. But what it does mean is it's okay if your kid doesn't do every single problem in the textbook and every single problem in the workbook. As a teacher, at the beginning of the year, I try to really lay things out very clearly, like do these exact problems, do these exact problems. And as the year goes on, I start backing off because now, hopefully, I've trained parents to see, like, oh, okay, this is kind of the way I can operate in my house. This is the way I can do some of the problems and not some of the problems. I can tell my kid to either do the left column or the right column. I can tell my kid to skip the basics when we get to the workbook. When you get to the workbook in class, I often tell kids, you have permission to skip the basics if you want to. Sometimes the basics are great because they're the basics, right? It walks you through step by step by step. But if you've got a kid who wants to work this problem using method 2 instead of method 1, and the basics are all using method 1, it is frustrating because then the boxes are there for them to do things a very specific way, and it's not the way their mind wants to do it. And if you would just let them skip and leave out all those extra boxes and just solve it, they can just solve it. So a lot of times I will tell kids, either skip the basics if you want to, it's optional. If you look at it and it feels good to you, do it. If you look at it and you think that is not at all the way I would solve that problem, then you have 2 choices. Skip the basics or leave out all the little boxes where they want you to put every specific answer and solve it your way. And that's okay too. So that's not saying don't do any of the work. It's saying, hey, how can I modify this work so that my kid still understands what they're doing and they can do it in a way that feels good to them? I don't typically skip anything after the basics unless I'm just eliminating some. So, for example, I would say skip the basics and do the rest of them. But I'm not going to say do the basics and then don't do anything else. Because all the other stuff, that's actually the meat of your work in that workbook that day. Challenges for me in class are always optional. My children at home are really good in math, my personal kids. Challenges were not optional for them. They had to do the options. They had to do the challenges at my house as a mom because my kids were good at math. If my kids weren't good at math, I don't know that that would be where I spent my time that day trying to pull teeth to get them to do the challenges. My kid was a really great writer. I might tell my kid, you have to write, an extra paragraph today instead of fighting with my kid to do the challenges. That wasn't really what my kid needed, right? So give yourself the freedom to know your kid and, hey, what's best for my kid? Is it best for my kid to be challenged and to try to work and think through this differently? Make them do the challenge. If the challenge is just going to frustrate them in a way that is not beneficial, don't make them do the challenge, right? So I would say basics are optional, challenges are optional. The stuff in the middle is where you really need to, that's your bang for your buck. As for training parents and training kids to know which questions they can leave off, because remember, we're not doing, you really don't have to do all the questions, overkill. But when you start looking through this is really hard to see, I'm sorry. When you start looking through your lesson for the day, either in the textbook or in the workbook, typically it goes from easier to harder. So sometimes I'll hear parents say, well, do the top half and not the bottom half. Well, if you do that, you just chunked off all the hard questions because you told them to do the top half, which is the easy half, and you left off the bottom half, which is the hard half, right? It makes sense to go progressively from easier to harder. So the better option would be choose either the left column or the right column, right? That's a little tweak, that's an easy tweak to make. Choose either the left side or the right side. So you're starting with some easy problems and working towards hard problems, but you're only doing the left or the right, you're only doing half of them. So those are ways that I easily make modifications. Sometimes I'll tell them, choose the left or the right. You can choose which column looks more fun to you. And they'll look and they'll think, oh, this problem looks fun. I'm doing this side. Great, knock yourself out, right? Sometimes you can look and you can say, oh, well, these problems here are only subtracting 2 numbers. When I get down to the bottom, now I've got 3 different numbers to subtract. You don't want to leave that problem off because that's different than the other stuff that they've been doing. So that's why I say, like, this is not the kind of thing where you want to just open it up the day of. It really is wiser for you to look ahead and say, okay, I see that this problem down here is totally different than this problem up here. It's probably best for me not to leave off this problem. They've got it there for a reason. Does that make sense? What am I missing, Sarah? For my papers that are flopped on the ground.
Do you have tips and tricks?
Oh yeah, okay, tips and tricks. So I have one child my personal child who is, both of my kids are pretty bright. The young one is to be determined, he's a whole different breed. But the older 2 are both very bright, but they're very different children. I have one who is very typical oldest child, very straight-laced, very type A. And then there's the next one who is a very typical middle child, and I'll just leave it at that. And so at our house, I have one who works very diligently, always has. She gets her work done, it's not a problem. And then I have one who will flop around on the floor and do cartwheels and lay underneath the table and kick her legs all day long if you let her. She's a freshman now, it's not quite so bad, but it's still bad sometimes. Anyway, so one of the best things that I found in my house was to set a timer, especially in the early days when we were really trying to train like the habits and the skills. And I would say, I'm giving you 45 minutes of my time, and when this 45 minutes is up, you are on your own. And on your own really just means we're not going to sit here and wait for you before we move on to history as a family. We're not going to sit here and wait for you before we move on to Bible as a family. You got 45 minutes. When that 45 minutes is up, we're putting math to the side. And later tonight, when we're all playing in the front yard and kicking the ball, you're going to sit your hind inside of the table and you're going to finish the math that you wouldn't finish in the 45-minute time level that I gave you. It's not every day, but on the days where it feels like you are spinning your wheels, that's a really good option to say, this is the time that I think it should take you, this is the time I'm giving you, and anything over that you still have to do, but now you do it on your own time. We all have those kids who think that they need you to help with every single problem, and they won't do anything unless you're sitting there with them to do every single problem. I see some of you nodding heads. We all have them. Your kids are capable. They really are, they're capable. But sometimes we enable them to not be capable because they say, I can't do it, I need help. And if you only have one kid that you're sitting there with, it's really easy to just help that one kid do the things. So I have learned that it's really helpful to say, I will help you with 3 problems, and I will only help you with 3 problems. Now, I'm not talking like at the very beginning of the lesson when you first start stuff, right? I'm talking about when you get to the workbook and they know how to do the stuff. And I'll say, I'll help you with 3 problems, and I'm only helping you with 3 problems. So choose wisely, get started, and when you get to one that you think you need help on, you might put a star and keep going. Y'all, 9 times out of 10, they don't even find 3 problems they need help with. They don't need help with anything but 1 problem. But if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, So that's a really good tip when you're working on stuff at home. I do that even in class, like when I'm doing a grade on something, I'll say, I'll help you with 3 problems, choose 3 problems you want help with, everything else you're on your own for. And it really gives them an ability to A, build confidence that they can do what they need to do, and B, build stamina to work harder and to work for longer. Sometimes, if you have a kid who really math is not their thing, do the textbook in the morning, come back and do the workbook in the afternoon. Don't think that you have to do it all in one sitting. That's long, it's exhausting. So give yourself permission to say, I'm going to do a little bit now, I'm going to do a little bit later. I think the other thing I have on here is to make notes, like put yourself a sticky note in your front of your teacher guide. And when you have a specific lesson that your kid has really struggled through, sometimes it's really worth sticking with it and working until they get it. And sometimes you know that you're beating a dead horse and you're not going to get anything done, and it's not worth the battle that day. And on those days, it doesn't mean you just don't get to do it, it means we're going to come back to it later. So make yourself a note in the front of your teacher guide, just a sticky note that says, hey, go back and work on chapter 4, lesson 7 at some point. And then maybe you just do 1 problem from chapter 4, lesson 7 every day for the next couple of weeks. I think that's super helpful. The only other thing I was going to say that I'll pass back to Sarah is I think that we have seen sometimes as the years progress that if you I'll just say, like, I love math. I'm a math person. I'd rather do math than anything else in the whole wide world. Well, school related. I love math. But I know that not everybody loves math. Like, it's not everybody's favorite cup of tea. And sometimes we'll have kids come to class and say, my mom said this is too hard yesterday. She said she didn't know how to help me and she figured you would fix it today.
They will tell us.
And yeah, you would think I'm kidding, but y'all 7 years in, we've heard it all. I do always tell parents though, like if you only believe half of what they tell you about me, I'll only believe half of what they tell me about you. So that's a very fair trade-off there. So, and also, like, we're moms, we've been there, we've all been there. But if you find yourself regularly saying, I'm out, I don't know how to help you, your teacher will help you tomorrow, your kids are gonna end up behind. Because realistically, you have them for 3 days and we only have them for 2, and I can't fix on today what they didn't get yesterday, and also what I need to teach them today. And it happens, and if it happens and you're like, I really have no clue how to help my kid today, send that teacher an email and we're gonna work with your kid the next day. They're gonna know it and we're gonna help you. But it can't be an everyday occurrence. And I think it happens really more with like older, I'm talking like logic rhetoric school kids sometimes. But I had this like big aha last year, and I thought it would be like me sending my kid to public school. And the public school teacher saying, I'm gonna do like 2 days a week with you at school, and the other 3 days a week you're on your own. And if your kid came home and said, my teacher told me today that I was on my own, and this happens over and over and over again, y'all, you're gonna be hot with that teacher who's not doing what your kid needs. And so all of that to say, y'all are awesome, everybody's doing their job, we're in good places here, but it can't be the kind of thing where regularly, not once in a while, but where regularly they're only getting taught at home or they're only getting taught at school, because if that's the case, they're missing half their instruction every week. So when those days come that you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, we've all been there, just reach out and say, hey, I tried to help my kid today, we were totally lost, will you look at it with her tomorrow? And I'm gonna say, for sure.
We'll do that.
Yeah. Right. Very good.
Thank you.
Here's
Let me join this with them.
I'm so happy to pass that mic on. There you go.
So here's what we hear a lot. But I'm not a teacher. I don't know if I can do this. Well, here's the thing about moms. You are a teacher. You taught your kid to talk, and to brush their teeth, and to hopefully be potty trained by now, right? You've taught your kid manners. You've taught your kid how to sit quietly in church. You've trained them how to do that because you are a teacher. Now, if you mean you're not a trained educator, okay, but the way that we are actually going to hold our kids' problems is very similar to how we hold as parenting. So usually I will hear somebody say something along the lines of, I just wish that there was more practice. Okay, what are you going to do about that? Because that means you actually already knew that your kid needed more practice. Then that means that we can do more practice problems. So you pull a problem from that chapter 7, and you start it off, and you do a warm-up problem until finally it clicks. Bless you. Yeah, I've heard people say, it just moves so fast, and there wasn't time for me to do that. Well, sometimes it does move fast, but honestly, what is also happening is you have to kind of look at it differently, because with the multiples and factors example that I had earlier, it's not going to say, these are multiples. You were supposed to go, oh, wait, do you remember when we did multiples 3 weeks ago? We're gonna use that here. And that is why looking ahead is so important, is because sometimes we need to remind ourselves, oh wait, I remember we did this, I think. And you can look back and remind yourself of that vocabulary, of the strategies that they used, so that you can build on it. Because if you just ignore the steps that they're missing or the concepts that they are having a hard time with, what ends up happening is that these build like stair steps, and now we have a missing step, or a shaky step, and they need those things shored up. So what we're going to talk about now is what I'm sure most of you are even here for is, okay, but we we are struggling. What do we do now? So, what I want you to know first is sometimes you do know something that you can do. You just needed to pull out the IXL or go back in the textbook and write it on a whiteboard and just do some of those problems again until they get it. My daughter was somebody that no matter what I did, I tried every single thing. I paid for apps. I purchased so many things for her to memorize her math facts. I don't know what it was, but it took her forever. But now, she knows her math facts, but I never got the satisfaction of sitting with a deck of cards and flipping through them and her nailing every single one. We never did that, not one time. But that was I didn't ever ignore it though. Every time she would say, now what is 7 times 8? I would go, well, what is 7 times 8? And then wait in the uncomfortable silence. Because what will happen is half the time they'll go, oh wait, I do know that one. But sometimes there's a little bit of a learned helplessness that mom's right in the right corner, and I can just ask her, and we get, like, please just be done with math. It's 56, for the love. Like, we're just done. And I think that is actually setting your kid up to believe about themselves that they need you when they don't. That's actually something that Liz was really great with Katie when she was in 4th grade. She came to school believing she was terrible at math. That girl is not, in the least. But it took Miss Weir saying, I'm pretty sure you got that, and walking away, and she would come home and she'd be like, Miss Weir wouldn't even help me. I sat there and asked her questions. She did not help me. And I said, and what happened? She goes, oh, I figured it out. Huh. That's crazy. Because she actually could, but she had to figure it out. We had to give her the opportunity to productively struggle. That's what we're looking for. I've told my own children this and all of my kids that this is what we are looking for when we are curating what we are doing next. That if I say I'm going to build muscle and I pick up my Expo marker and start doing this is not going to help me much, right? But kids want it to feel like this. They don't want it to feel like they're holding a 5-pound weight or a 10-pound weight. But it's only in holding the little bit heavier weight that they're going to grow in those skills and grow those muscles. And so when kids go, this is just too hard, I can't do it. In class, I will sometimes go, because they go, oh, right, okay, I'm supposed to work at this a little bit. So, this is something that, since you're so great at it, I do have a question. How do you know what productive struggling looks like? And then how do you prompt a kid towards the answer without just giving it to them? What do you look for?
Well, again, but this goes back to knowing your kids, right? Some kids I can't just say, you can figure that out, because they can't figure it out, and they need help. But a lot of kids can, and I feel like one of the things that's really helpful is just asking questions. Like, if they can't get from point A to point Z, that's too much. But can you ask them a question to get from point A to B? Sometimes the easiest thing is, what do you think you're going to do first? Tell me just the first step. Okay, tell me what's next. What should you do next? Well, I think I'm going to do 8 times 7. You're right, you're going to do 8 times 7. But I don't know what 8 times 7 is. Okay, how can you figure out what 8 times 7 is? Could you draw a picture? Yeah, I could do that. Could you skip count by 8s? I could. Could you skip count by 7s? I could. So sometimes it's not, like, I'm not going to tell you what the next step is, but asking them or prompting them just the one next step. Just the one next step. Sometimes also what I think is really helpful, for example, we did a paper today in math, and there was perimeter on there. Well, we haven't done perimeter all year long. We haven't seen perimeter since last year. But I had looked ahead, and so as I'm going through the paper with them today, I said, hey, y'all, there's a perimeter question on here. Talk to me about perimeter before I set you loose and let you work on your own. And they said, oh, perimeter is like, it goes all the way around, and it's a rectangle. Yeah, so how many numbers do you need? We're going to have 4 numbers. It's a rectangle, and there's 4 sides. You're right. But I only see 2 numbers here. Why are there only 2 numbers here? Well, there's only 2 numbers there, which is weird, because it's given us 1 length and 1 width. Well, you're going to be able to solve the problem with just those 2 numbers. Well, we can, but we're going to have to put them on all the sides. So we're going to, like, it's just talking through those steps. Like, I'm not telling them, this is how you solve the problem. I'm looking ahead to say, hey, this could be a hiccup, and it's just a quick prompting of, okay, it's been a while since you've seen this, remind me what this is, tell me what you think you're gonna do, okay, great, now go do it. So a lot of it really is, like, what's just the one next step, and then a lot of it is, as a mom, as a parent, as a teacher, looking ahead to say, oh, this could be a place where they get stuck. And instead of letting them get there and just struggle and work it the wrong way, it's better for me to give them a quick heads up, like, hey, this looks different than all the other ones we've done, and why is this one different? Okay, how are you gonna do this one differently then? So it's you know, if there's like reactive parenting and then there's proactive parenting, that's the way I feel about this. Like, we can either react because they've done it wrong, or we can kind of help set them up to begin with to be successful. Always, no, because then they're dependent on you to always do it for them. But I knew in advance, perimeter is something they haven't seen, and this is the one problem I'm really gonna set them up for before I turn them loose to work.
And sometimes I have heard people say, well, that was fantastic. There were so many questions that just came to her like this, and I don't know how to do that. But honestly, a lot of the time it's actually just voicing what's going on in our head. Because we are actually already thinking the same questions that they need to hear. Well, how would you solve this problem? How would you set up this bar model? Well, which one would be the longer one? I'm not really sure. Those are the questions that you were needing to ask your kid, even if you didn't know the answer to them and you were actually the one asking them. Because sometimes my kids love to be like, oh, Mom, it's actually this, to teach me, because I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And if you set them up, tell me everything you know about this process, that's my favorite question to ask, to start off with when I legitimately wasn't there and I maybe didn't remember all of it, or I have forgotten, or I came to the lesson and didn't prepare. Please don't do that very often, but sometimes it does happen. I mean, it does. That is the question I ask a lot. Tell me everything you know about this. Because sometimes it's them talking themselves through it that will trigger something. Now, all of those things are when your kid is only kind of minorly struggling. There are times that we have some major struggle that's not productive anymore. Because when going back to this example, I say now, if I decided that I needed to build muscle and I went and I picked up my car, I would hurt myself, right? I've now jumped too far. And if you have a kid who is consistently not feeling like they're lifting 10-pound weights, but feeling like they're lifting 200-pound weights, that's a reach out thing. Because that is typically something that a teacher is absolutely going to be able to specifically give you what your kid needs or to work with you. That is a parent-teacher conference. That's not something that a seminar that we can stand up here and say, this is the one thing that's going to solve all your problems and save your life. Okay, but that is something that those teachers, that's why they're there. That is why you have joined in this partnership, I'm assuming. Because that's why I joined. I didn't want to have to be the sole voice. And I was actually homeschooling before this, and I was on my own, but I always knew that once we get to 5th grade, I may be out. And and it wasn't because I couldn't teach 5th grade, it was because I wanted somebody who was really actually good at geometry, because I was not, to be the person that was going to teach my kid that, because she could benefit from hearing from somebody that really was the expert in their field. And that's what we're here for. So I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I am saying that maybe I might have something that could help your kid. But a lot of what we also hear is, I did not grow up doing this, and I don't know how to do a bar model. I don't know how. I know bar models are the thing every time, but I'm sure there's at least one person in here that's like, I'm going because of bar models specifically. Yeah. So here's the thing. Here's the unfortunate thing, and I'm really sorry that this is the answer, but there is not a magic wand. There is not one tiny little tip that I can give you. This actually is you having to dig in and learn the content. We do have lots of resources, and I'm going to email them out to all of Grammar School after this, as well as the recording, if it actually recorded. If that did not record, well, shoot. But I'm going to send them all out, and there is a bar model process sheet that is on there that we have pulled things from 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th of where they started and where it goes. And the reason why we realized that was a thing was because some of us older parents, I shouldn't have said that, kids of older students, thank you,
She's like 10 years younger.
No, much.
Every time we realize how big the gap actually is.
No, just when you figure it out, you're really bothered by that.
I feel great.
I feel great about being 10 years younger. So, I got distracted, my apologies. We discovered that it was actually when we were sitting with our older students, we would go, oh my word, that's why they have to do that thing in 3rd grade. And we didn't know until we had done that thing in 6th grade. And so take it from somebody who has realized that those things build on purpose. And if you're new to this program, you might need to start back with some 2nd grade problems and then some 3rd grade problems. IXL has skill plans that are linked 4 dimensions, and you can go to every single grade level and pick the skill that your kid is struggling with. That does not mean you should do every single lesson that IXL has to offer on bar models, plus all of your lessons, because your kids will drown. But can you start with a warm-up problem of a bar model from 2nd grade? Yes. I will say the one thing. This is not a magic wand thing, but the one thing I will say about bar models, require your students to draw them every time. In kindergarten, my kid could look at it and go, it's 4 + 5. Why would I draw that? That's dumb. Because they're building the skill of learning to draw it. So that then by the time they're using a comparison model in 4th grade, and they have to realize which one was longer, where the units were, and that this was actually an extra piece, and we have to take it off, and then we're gonna have to do 3 different calculations to find the answer, they're not still struck with, but what are the 2 things that I need to put by the bar model? Because we want them to actually have built those skills the whole time. So that is unfortunately one you just have to kind of dig into and learn it. And I spent hours on YouTube when I first started Singapore figuring out what it all was. Because I didn't know. I didn't know what number bonds were. I didn't understand how to use number bonds in 4th grade math because I hadn't started with just numbers to 10. So in kindergarten and 1st grade, I made the mistake of thinking they have done this to 10 so many times, just skip it. But the thing is I always say, be nice to your future self, be nice to your future kid's self, and put into practice so that then by the time they're doing something different, they are so automatic with knowing what the 10 is that they can do the 2nd grade subtraction and regrouping. Because you practice with them 10 so many times that your kids are like, oh, it's 3. And they just know. So if you put in the time, trusting the process along the way, that is where I have seen for my own kid, because Lauren got to, my youngest is in 4th, I got to start in kinder with her with dimensions and go all the way through. And I have seen that fruit of me sitting with numbers to 5, and then numbers to 10, and then numbers to 20, and actually making her do it fully, because she now has what we're doing is we're building the number sense. We're building that your kid has an innate understanding of how those numbers work. And the only way that grows is by a natural skill that God gave them, that's my middle kid, or by you sitting with counting bears and lining them up again and again and again. Because that is what she needed. She does not need the counting bears now. She is so fast at mental math. It's honestly astonishing from where we came from. Because she was my kid that I had to drag out those counting bears longer than what the book wanted me to. I had to go back to it and pull it back. When we did fractions in 3rd grade, those fraction strips and fraction circles came right on out. Now she didn't need them forever this time, but she has to see it. But I know my kid. She doesn't know how to do memory work unless that book's in front of her. Because she is a visual learner. That's me. If my kid reads me a problem and they say, what's the answer? I say, I lost you after the. I have no clue what you just said. It was not English. I have to see it. So if you know that about your kid, then you can set them up for that success from the beginning. And I really hope that you can hear that what we really want you to know is that you are yourselves are as capable as what we want your kids to know that they are capable of. If we can ask our third grader to draw that bar model, we can ask you to learn how to draw that bar model. Because they are going to mimic what we do. And if we say, bar models are dumb, man, this is just like it's 8 and 9, just add them together and move on. You're never going to use this. But the thing is they will in every class until they're done with dimensions. And even then, my child in algebra looked at her very first word problem in algebra and said, I don't know how to do this. I can't write the equation. I know how to draw the bar model, but I can't figure out how to draw the equation. And I said, the equation is the picture from the bar model. The unit is x. And she goes, oh, that was it. That's why we do it. A bar model is a picture of an algebraic equation. And no, your second grader doesn't need to know algebra, but they will one day. And if we have built it all along, they're ready for it then. And they fly. My kids now just fly through it, and they are bright. They are bright. But it is not something, only my middle kid, I would say, has that very innate, God-given gift of number sense that didn't have to be trained. It's something that we just worked on. So I want you to know that I know it's possible because I've done it. I've sat with the counting bears. And it works. It really does. So I want you to have the chance now, though, to ask the questions I know you have, because sometimes the counting bears is not the thing you needed to hear. So, is there a question? You will not have to speak on this mic, I promise. I'm going to put it down actually. Please don't hold back your questions. What questions do you have? And for the rest of this time, for as long as you need to ask questions, we will ask questions. Okay, here we go. Yes, ma'am.
So mine's in kindergarten, and so it's all extremely complicated, which is great, but how do I, what are some tips and tricks to stretch the time on it, because she gets it and then she's over it. So what can I do to engage her more, to stretch that time period out? How can I be better for her?
That's a good question. I will say that sometimes those limits that we give, my kids sometimes don't take that whole limit of time. So if we say, imagine about an hour, and they finish that, then that is where you can play some of those games that are in the books. You can pull out an Excel lesson. You can make them go back to games where they are using the manipulatives, because sometimes that is actually just a way that's what we're building in kindergarten, is just that number sense of what does 5 really look like, and what does it really feel like, and ask her the questions. I used to play this game with Lauren where I would hold things, like I would hold counters in my hand, and I would say, okay, there's 10 here. And then I would put a certain number on she'd have to close her eyes and put a certain number on the table and hold the other ones in my hand. And she would tell me what was in my hand, but I made her do it fast. Because building that automaticity for those number bonds is really, I think, specifically what really helped with the mental math for her. So that's what I would say, building games and activities. And you know what, if your kid is naturally good at math and it really doesn't take them the whole hour, I mean, I would say that's fine.
Go play in the backyard.
Play in the backyard. You don't have to make them sit for the whole time, but just maybe pull in a game or so.
And I will say too, like, especially with the littles, there's memorizing, 3 till 7 is 10, and then there's understanding what that actually looks like. And those are 2 very different things. When I was teaching public school, they had this big, I don't know, aha at some point, so everything's always changing around there, never know what's coming the next year, but they realized they had these high schoolers who were so far behind, and they realized it wasn't that they didn't know how to do calculations, they had no number sense. And so they went back with those kids. I'm talking like kindergarten, 1st grade level work, like, here's 5, if I take 2 away, how many are left? Or, oh, I have exactly what Sarah was saying, like, there's 10 counters in my hand, I'm gonna put 3 on the table, now how many are still in my hand? They couldn't do that. They had no concept of, like, they could tell you 3 plus 7 was 10, but they didn't really understand what 3 was and what 7 was and how they went together to make 10. Or they didn't understand that 3 and 7 is really like 5 and 2 and 3, you know, does that make sense? And so, they went back and they taught those kids very basic, like those kinds of exercises over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, those 9th graders were on grade level. And it wasn't because they didn't, again, like, it's not that they couldn't do the calculations, they didn't understand what they had no number sense. So those are the things in kindergarten and 1st grade where Sarah's saying, like, make sure they actually, it's not just that she can memorize what 5 plus 4 is, so she actually had a picture in her head of what 5 is and what 4 is and how those go together to make almost 10, but not quite. Because I will tell you the number of kids that I have, so I've taught everything, I've taught, I don't know, I guess up through 6th grade math here. And our kids who've been here for a long time, like started with the process all the way through, man, those kids, their number sense, their ability to do stuff in their heads is unreal compared to some kids who come in later in the program. And it's not because the kids who come in later aren't bright, they're not capable, they just haven't had the same training of doing those things in their head and that number sense. It is amazing to watch those kids be able to figure stuff out in their head. So, does that answer that question?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm that second group. So 3rd grade is our first year here.
You're gonna be just fine.
My daughter is extremely nervous because multiplication starts next week and she's never done that. And like reading ahead, it's like, remember in 2nd grade when
Yes,
you
right.
did all of this stuff, and she's like, no, I didn't. So in mental math, she's not good at it because she doesn't have the numbers, but like, I don't have 2nd grade to go back to.
Right.
Or what do you do?
But you do have IXL, and so
Okay.
when Sarah's gonna send us an email, I'm old, I have touchy free money, it's fine. Sarah's gonna send out an email later that we have, like, some stuff from last year and the stuff that we've added along the way. One of the things is really explicit, like, this is how you get to an IXL lesson that will be helpful. And then, another thing is, there's videos, and they're called Subitizing, S-U-B-I-T-I-Z-I-N-G. And it'll be on there, but when you look at it, you're like, what is this? It's videos that show like 3 dots and 5 dots together, or it'll show on a 10 frame, like 5 and 4. And they're short and they're quick, but if you could get her to watch those just ever so often, that will build number sense for her.
Okay. The IXL skill plans are organized by chapter, by book grade level. So like you can go to the 2nd grade book, go to the multiplication, because they will do the same chapters every single time.
Okay.
That's what she was saying, that you can say with the number sense, they're gonna do number sense that very first chapter of every single year of all the grade levels.
Yeah, so look, like that's what is in this book here. So like when you're looking at chapter 3 is multiplying, well you can go back, 3rd grade, you can go back to 2nd grade and see where it shows up here. Like 2nd grade, chapter 9 is multiplication and division. So you could go to IXL, chapter 9 for 2nd grade, and it will pull up multiplication and division. So you're not willy-nilly having to like dig through there. Use this scope and sequence at the beginning to give you a starting point.
And I will say in 2nd grade, it's mostly arrays because it is pictorial. So it's going to be 5 butterflies across and 3 butterflies down. How many is it total? Like that kind of picturing what it is and picturing that it's repeatedly adding or that you can kind of group them together to find the answer. So, but those lessons, it will be lessons that look exactly like that. So that's how you can go back if you need to fill in something.
But I will
Jennifer?
tell you too, like, it will just be that way this year. Like, this
Yeah.
year, you
Yes.
feel like you're swimming a little bit, but next year she'll be leveled out.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you have a question?
With the bar model, most of them are understandable. There were like a couple in there that's like, where did
You and
that
me
number
both.
wasn't even in the equation?
Right.
And how did you know to fill it in that space? Like,
Yes.
there's no hint, except for the answer and where it's written, that you would even put that there. Like, those were the problems that were just,
Yes.
so I don't really have a question about that, I just need to say,
That's okay, perfect.
You're not the only one.
Safe space.
Noted.
It's a safe space, we get it.
This is an observation, I don't know if I'm right, but it leads into that, is I feel like part of the math is just exposure, right? So is that true that like the ones that in 2nd grade Will's doing with like part of the problem they missing? I'm like, okay, we're just gonna do that together and then we're moving on because I feel like that's something that they just want you to are there quarterly objectives, especially like my kindergartner, they're like, she needs to know this by now, and she doesn't, I'm like, I wish I had that list, cause we would have definitely.
Okay, we do have those, and that is a valid point. We can send those out. Those are right now just for like they're within the teachers, but they're probably finished enough to publish. But I would say that if there's a, like, don't print them out and then like hold us to it, because if we decide that we're like, actually, we don't wanna do that in quarter 3, we wanna do that in quarter 4.
Well, and I think it makes more sense in kindergarten than
Yeah.
in 3rd grade, but like, especially just her starting out, like, what numbers does she need to know by November? You know,
Yeah.
just kinda,
Yeah.
I think it helps more for kindergarten, but also I think it helps me know, okay, this is something we have to get.
Yeah.
This is an exposure problem that we're just gonna think through and kind of play with.
Yeah.
This is, you know,
We have a document, actually, Sarah and I were talking about this yesterday, trying to decide if it's like finished enough to send out. But it actually does have like all the strands, so it's a scope and sequence chart from kindergarten, I think it goes through 7th grade. Maybe, we're not using the same curriculum for 6th and 7th grade anymore, but it for sure would go from K through 5, and it will show like, addition and subtraction, and it shows what's addition and subtraction. It doesn't have pictures and stuff, but it will say like, this is what they need to know in kinder, this is what they know at first, this is what they know in second. So it does give you an ability to look at it and say, oh, they're gonna do this again in 1st grade, they're gonna do this again in 2nd grade. Or for you to look at it and go, oh, this doesn't show up again after this year, that gives me a good idea that this actually needs to be done this year.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
yeah. My only other question is like, when we're kind of tailoring to our kids, on the textbook stuff, should we be going through all of that, like even the do section, and then once we get to the workbook, say, okay, if we're good on the basics, skip the basics?
That's how I typically did it.
Yes.
Like at home now, my kids are so old that they're in school, but that's the way we would operate. I did most of the textbook with them.
And then on like, say if there's a, like the other day in 5th grade, they had a do problem that was using a different method. And I was like, I don't know that method, is that the one you use, Elle? She was like, no, it's like, we're gonna skip.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So I would say for the skipping thing, please do not hear that if that contains all of the problems, that now that means you only need to do like 5, because that's not how math works. So we do still want them to practice, but it does mean that by the time you get to workbook, when it has that little chunk that has like 8 to 12 problems, I usually say, if my kid is trucking along and she's got it, then I'm like, do the first 2 columns, we're skipping this one. Sometimes that's actually just enough of a motivator where she goes, yay, I'm gonna do them all, that it actually makes her work faster, because
Or sometimes I'm like, if you can
Makes a
show me
difference.
that you can do the left column
Yes.
correctly and not miss any, you don't have to do the right column.
yeah.
Well, turns out they'll put a little effort into that left column.
But if they're struggling, that isn't your cue to ease off and do less. That might be your cue to spread it out, but it's not your cue to be like, well, this is hard, obviously, so never mind.
Well, it's so good to hear that, because with Will, I was, poor thing, he's doing all of them. And I'm like, we really need to be just doing some mental math, because you're weak there, but you know this concept, and it was just painful at the beginning, so
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
great to be able to.
And that is
That is-
exactly what you should be doing. what
Yes,
you just said.
and that is what we want. We want you to make the space for the things that your kids are doing.
And here's the deal, you love your kids, right? Like, you want them to be successful, so you're not gonna take out the questions you don't need, you know? Like, if you know he still needs it, you're gonna keep doing it, but if you're looking at it going, oh my gosh, we've spent 30 minutes just for the sake of spending 30 minutes, and we could have spent 15 because you didn't need all the rest of these
Yes.
problems, like, and then here's the deal, if you get 2 days later, and you're like, oh, turns out you don't know this as well as I thought you did, well, then you're just gonna go back and pull those problems back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have the second question. So, do they need to write out, I don't know if this is part of what they tell me, I only need to believe half of it, but I was told, what I was told was, in math, they do not need to write out all the steps,
Here's the thing,
because he's a fast.
right, and here's the thing, I think there are kids and some specific, like, pieces of math where they really can do it in their head. So I only fight the battle on the teaching end when they really start making mistakes, and I'm like, you made a 70 on a paper that you could have had a 100 on. So you're gonna have to decide, kid, you're gonna have to decide, mom, what's it worth to you? You know, like, are you happy with the 70 because you did it all in your head? Knock yourself out. But there will come a time, my
second kid is she can do so much in her head, she can do it faster than she can write it out. Well, then we hit about 7th grade, and she had no ability to work out challenging problems with any sort of sequential steps or any sort of organization. And we spent so much time that year with me taking a paper and saying, well, I'm throwing that one in the trash, and I'd chuck it and say, start again. Because we had to train how to work through the steps because she hadn't had to do it. And it was painful
It is, even
to
now
wait
it's
until
painful.
then to do
Yeah.
it.
Even now it's painful
Yeah.
because he looks at it and goes, it's this, and I'm like, wait, whoa, okay.
Right.
Explain to me how that is. And he's like,
Right.
well, no, like, let's.
Right.
Yes.
And it may be that you just pick and choose. Like it may be that you say you can do these 3 in your head. You have to do these 3
Okay.
on
Yeah.
steps. You
Yeah.
know, like give him some freedom because he's good at that. You know?
Yeah.
Like give him some freedom to not
Do it all.
crush it all.
We don't,
but you
we
got-
don't need to beat a dead horse
But at
because
some point
that
they're going
actually.
to have to.
But
show
they
their
are,
work.
they are.
They are
yeah.
going to have to
And
show their work.
it gets to where you can't do it without
Yeah.
showing your work.
Yeah.
And then back to that, my personal story of my kid trying to help her get those steps laid out. It's painful. And then it was like, well, I don't want to take up a whole piece of paper. Friend,
Yeah.
I will buy you another spiral. I will buy you another spiral. Take up
Yeah.
the space we need to do the right work. So-
The other thing I've done with my middle one, who is also really just naturally really great at that number sense and mental math piece, is I make him make notes at least. So if he does something in his head, I'm like, write the first step answer, and then write that second step answer to kind of train the sequential ordering of steps without him having to actually write it out because he does not.
Okay, tell me the first part of that again.
Okay, so I'll make him make notes.
Okay.
So that like the first step that he did, and now he is the kid that will combine it into, he'll combine 3 steps in one
Yep,
thing.
yep.
That's just how he did it. Whatever figure he got, I'll have him write down that answer.
Like
Or
just
he-
the number sentence, like maybe
Just
he's
the
just writing
number.
6 plus 7. Instead of
Yes.
having to write 6 plus 7 equals 13, he's just writing that his first step was 6 plus 7, and
Well,
his next step was 13 minus
Like
5.
he jumps with the conversions, he'll go from this and then like, he'll pull that out with
Yes.
no explanation.
Yes.
Okay.
That was a problem with my middle one too, and the thing is it started making a difference when he is my, it's good enough, kid, and so it's like, well, I was real close. Like, yeah, well, cool, that's still wrong, and so it was this, I had to then painfully, but a little less painfully because he was a little bit younger, because it was actually in 5th grade that I had to start doing that, where I said, okay, your problem was is you did 4 steps in your head and you forgot that the first one was 115, and then you got the whole thing wrong. So do yourself a favor and write those things down as you go, so that then you can double check your work. Because that's the other thing, is for the, it's close enough kid, they are shocked when they get their math thing back and they're all marked wrong. And he was pretty close,
Yeah.
but also still wrong.
Yeah.
Because he was just like, that was just him.
I will tell you, like 5th grade specifically, I'll give them partial credit if I can see like, oh, your final answer was wrong, but you were right all the way to here.
Yes.
But then if I can only see your final answer that's wrong, then it's just either right
So
or
they
it's
show their
wrong.
work in class?
Yeah.
Good grief.
Now see, this is where sometimes kiddos will be like, oh, I never have to
Yeah.
do that. My kid feels so tired.
Our teacher said this year we don't have to do that.
No.
Yeah, trust me, been on the other side of that one too. Do y'all have any questions?
I have one more.
Yes.
I have a question.
When we're like looking over their math homework and checking the answers, and there's like 1 wrong, what is the expectation? Again, do I get to be the boss and be like, okay, you missed 1, I think it's because you're messy, so you need to be neater. And then if she doesn't get neater, then I'm like gonna make her be neater.
Yes.
And like, is that
Yes.
just to have a discussion, look at it, see where the problem is?
My kids still, when they come back with, like, when the girls bring work home, it doesn't matter if you missed 1 or if you missed 5, we're gonna fix what you missed, because I want you to see where your
So you
mistake
go through and
was.
make them fix it?
Hey, Audra, sometimes what I do as Zion is we have 2 separate whiteboards and I'll say, I'll work it and you work it and we'll compare notes to see.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
I think it depends on
Just a silly mistake, that's one thing, but if it's like.
Right.
If there's an
Content,
issue.
yeah, we're gonna fix it.
Yes, I make them explain to me why they got it wrong, and
Yeah.
sometimes I just have them do it out loud. If it's just 1 to 3 problems, That's usually my little realm at home of me saying, that was a calculation error and you were just, you know, rushed through it. But I'll ask them, what was your mistake and what should this have been? Could you do differently next time? If they can answer that, then we're good. I say we're good. Yeah. Yes.
This isn't really a question, I just want to love any feedback, tell me all the things. I have one kid, and I know you should not compare children. And I know I don't want my kid compared to your Lauren, because he says Lauren is a Jesus. But, anyway, so I'm not looking for comparison, and I know that that's not a good thing, but on the other side, like, I'm like, hey, how long did it take your kid to do the IXL lesson on Monday? Because we were 54 minutes in. Is this normal? You know what I mean? And so
The answer is yes. That took Lauren forever.
okay, I'm gonna let off now.
You need to let it
So
know.
wrong.
That sweet baby girl hit 50 multiplication problems before I said, you're done. That's enough math for the day.
Yeah. And then, the thing with my IXL is he was like, Mom, it sent me back 4 class. And I'm like,
That's exactly what happened.
the truth. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, oh, good grief, you know?
Yes.
But, so I know I don't wanna compare, and I know every kid's different, but at the same time, like, there's so many times where I don't have an older kid to say, okay, like, you know, yeah, well, I think he's doing okay. So then I'm reaching out, like, is he okay? Like, is this normal, or do we need to do better? Does he do this in class, and this is amazing? And so I can say, like, hey, is Bronk the only one that is struggling with pace? Like, but he's so thorough, and he wants to get it right, he's very competitive with himself. And I appreciate that, but I also don't want him to like he recognizes other kids are moving, things are shuffling, and then he's like, I'm the last one. Mom, I was the last one today. And I'm like, who cares? Like, who cares? And so, like yesterday, I texted, Miss Giddens, and I was like, hey, can you let me know, like, if he doesn't finish the math test, is he gonna miss recess? Because last year he missed recess, and he got PTSD, because he missed recess, and so it's like a punishment. If he's not fast, he's a punishment, and I'm like, I don't know. So Jesus be near, but please just encourage me and on my mouth to tell me, I mean, anything that you can, anybody can tell me to help me feel better, or, you know, recognize, like,
I think those are the
we
things
get
that
better.
yeah, I want to know that.
Yeah.
My kid on track.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are y'all doing at home?
Yes.
I'm not sure if we're like on average. And I'll tell you, I think that was the hardest thing. So in 5th grade, we start getting concrete grades, like you get legit grades in math. But before that, as a mom at home, I was like, I have no idea how my kid is doing compared to everybody else. And again, it's not that I want to know if she's the best or the worst.
Sure.
I just want to know, like, are we the only ones struggling, or are we the only ones that's finding this so easy? Like, am I missing something? You know, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But I would say, like, man, those moms in those grade levels, like my girls' grade, man, we got tight real fast.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
didn't take long for us to start sending emails or text to each other and saying, it took us, 35 minutes today, how long did it take you? And you don't have to do that for very long before you realize, like, okay, we're all about
We're
the
good,
same
yeah.
picture. Or, oh, wow, my kid is way struggling compared to other people. And then now we're getting about that, you know? So I think it sounds to me like you're doing it, reaching out to each other,
Yeah.
asking your friends.
When I don't want to come across as negative, like,
No,
I'm
no, no, no.
I don't want to be like,
No.
dimensions is that's why I'm here, because I cannot complain in my mind if I'm not reaching out and doing what's all, you know what I mean, you're offering us a service, and so we need to be here.
But also
We can't-
sometimes it's like, here are my 5 closest friends that I know will shoot me straight. I'm gonna post those 5 people instead of, group me, because sometimes it is like a group me. And
I don't want to be
guilty,
guilty,
like,
that's
oh,
why.
well, that's it. And sometimes, like, it's easier, like, the people who speak up are the ones who are hot and frustrated. It's not the
Right.
ones who are like, we had a great day today.
Yeah,
You know?
Right.
This is great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yours was terrible.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's the people who also had a hard day that are
Right.
speak up.
Yeah.
So, I've learned over the years that sometimes it's better for me to just reach out to 3 people and say,
Yes.
hey, and, how is today for you?
Right.
That was the thing that I really was missing when I was homeschooling on my own, because I would look at her as a 2nd grader and I would go, well, I think I remember where a 2nd grader is supposed to be, but also am I wrong? Is she struggling more than not, or like, I couldn't figure it out, and that right there, that's the community piece, that your teacher can tell you if it is a problem, and sometimes, like Jennifer's gone now, but sometimes it is home, Lauren, is different than class Lauren.
Yeah.
And mama sometimes gets the hardest piece because they are safe with you.
Sure.
And so sometimes it's that kind of thing where in reality, they are actually okay, but they are dragging their feet at home. And that is where I think if you're worried specifically about pacing, setting the timer, choosing some problems to not help him on or help him on, cutting some of them, but not a lot, but just some to help him kind of feel like, oh, I don't have to do those 3 problems, so maybe that will help me go a little
And
faster.
actually too, like, kids love to be able to choose things for
Yes.
themselves. You know, like, would you like the red shoes or the blue shoes, right?
Yes.
Like, so you can choose, do you wanna do the left column or the right column? Or, hey, if you do the left column and it's all right, you don't have to do the right column,
Yeah.
show me what you're
Yep.
doing.
Yes.
It's like, that, like, since it's empowerment for
Yes.
them, that is a big.
Yes.
That's how we like it every day.
That's how you do every day.
I'm the master negotiator, I'm like, okay, get this, it's like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, yes, that's what I just did.
Because mama knows her kid.
That's right, but I will go ahead and add in that the review that is being done in class is so wonderful.
Good.
I appreciate that, that's news for us.
Yes.
And I think it's wonderful, and especially that feedback coming back in the folder and be like, yes, 15 out of 16, you killed it, great job. And so that is also my good feedback on how are we doing, like, I hope every other kid, you know what I mean? But I'm gonna be like, okay, well, if he's only missed 1 out of these 20 problems, then I think we're okay.
Yeah.
And so that's really great and very helpful, so thank you all for doing that.
And I would say too, like, I kind of sometimes am surprised by the number of people who don't, not really grade, but at least look at your kids' work, like, there's things along the way that I'm like, oh, I would never have thought that I needed to do that, except for now I know. And one of those is, like, Lily would get 3 problems wrong, she's like, you're pretty good, I missed 3. And I'm like, yeah, except for there were only 7 problems to do. So missing 3 is actually not stellar. You know? So also, like, on the mom end of things, if I had just been a mom and not a teacher, I don't know that I would have known to have said, I'm gonna give you an ish grade on this every day. Like, she needed to see me say, you missed 3 out of 8 and you're barely passing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
not as a like gotcha, but as a sort of, she's the kid who needed to see
That's
numbers to know
good.
that actually missing 3 out of 8 is not the same as missing 3 out of 20.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know? So you have the ability at home to grab a calculator and say, well, 3 out of 8 is this, you know? Because I will say, one of the things that we run into in 5th grade is you've got kids who are really, really smart, and they start making bad grades in 5th grade math that first quarter, and parents are panicking. And I'm like, actually, it's not that your kid is not still just as bright as they were last year, it's that they never had to get it right the first time.
Yep.
Because it used to be that we would say, like, go check your answer in the book, oh, this answer's wrong, let's go back and fix it. That's a great habit.
Right.
Except for when you're getting a grade on it, you get 1 shot the first time and you get a grade on it. And you just have to go back and fix it, but the grade is what stands, right? And so it's not that they're not great at math, it's that they haven't had to like.
They're building a different
first
skill.
time, they've always had to go back and just fix it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a kindness in them to put some grades every so often before the grade on.
Yes.
yours.
Yes.
So good.
Because that was my child.
That's
My
what you're talking about.
super
All
bright,
together.
yeah, super bright, fantastic math student coming home with 4 out of 6 wrong. And I would say, what did you do? And he's like, well, I accidentally wrote a 1. Okay, well, how was she supposed to know that you actually meant 3? Because what you wrote was 1. And, but I was like, it was close. And that is actually a learned skill
Yeah.
that as your kids get a little older, for sure, they don't understand that 3 wrong when there's only 6 problems is different than 3 wrong when you have 50.
Yeah.
They somehow think that's equatable. It's not. It's a very different grade. And then they're shocked. Yes.
So my daughter, this is her 2nd year at the Oaks, and so I'm definitely seeing the fruit of dimensions this year. So last year was like, oof, and then this year is like, okay, we're not like the top of the class, but we're getting somewhere. And so my question is for bar models, because that's like my biggest struggle. So you're saying I can go to IXL and go to like kindergarten and hit like, there's a way I can search, do all, everything for bar models we can do for, and then just.
They start in 2nd grade, but yes.
Okay, so 2nd grade bar models. So I can go to IXL, which we were good. So I don't know what I missed, but.
So, and I think the thing is that if you saw it as starts with problems that they actually would know how to do on their own.
Okay.
But that's the skill they're learning. It's not how to add 5 birds plus 4 birds, but it's how to draw the bar model.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you look through Carol on second grade, you're looking for anything that says work.
I was gonna ask you that, does the memory mapping?
Yes.
What that show us out here?
Okay, so I started with like little counters, or really anything, but something small that I could fit in my hand. And I started with numbers up to 5, because I did this in pre-K when I started it. And I would say, okay, I have 5, see, let's count them, there's 5 in my hand, and then I'd have her close her eyes, and I would take out a handful and leave them on the table. And she would have to tell me what was left in my hand. So if there's 2 on the table, and there was 5 in the beginning, how many would be left in my hand? Because it helps her to see by,
So she's holding them.
I'm holding them.
You're holding them, you take them out.
I take them out. Yes. And if you do it to up to 5, it's actually really easy, but it also is, that's how numbers bonds work. A number bond for 5 is 0 and 5, and 1 and 4, and 2 and 3, and 3 and 2. And so if I am holding that number, then she's actually working on those number bonds, but from being able to see it. But she is also having to hold in her brain that I started with 5. So it's building that mental math thing. That was the thing that I picked up after doing the first 2, my first pancake situation. And then the last one, I'm like, I'm good at this now.
Is there a place to find more games like that?
Pinterest is always my go-to for that. If you will
Search for that.
Subitizing. So we also have a video that we're gonna link so you can see that. But if you look for subitizing videos or number sense games or like those kinds of things,
I'm terrible at number sense. Like when she was talking about the old
Same.
was art grade, because even still, my child would be like, let's,
Yeah.
7, I'm like, so how do I not know
it
that?
actually was me teaching the mental math strategies that made me go, that's how people have been doing math in their head this whole time? Because I'm trying to like line up 27 plus 15 and doing that in my brain. Like I didn't know that you would like, had no clue.
Yeah, I found something called like recorded math. I don't know, but it was like they said record it, and I just said it. Okay. They have a math problem, or you give them a math problem, it's like 3 plus 5, and you get 2 or 3 seconds. And if they wrote the answer, great. If they didn't, you go to the next one, and then you do it again and again. And it's just, I noticed it took the pressure off, where it's not like he had to figure that out, and then I could tell, okay, those are the ones he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And it was a very calm way of doing it. So I liked that.
No pressure.
Yes.
Just, okay.
And I think the big thing, honestly, if your kids are just